welcome everybody for our Global Leaders in Diversity and Inclusion Speaker Series. I'm Jill Finlayson. I'm the director of the EDGE in Tech Initiative at the University of California, and our focus is on expanding diversity and gender equity in tech. I'm here today with Carolyn Mims. Would you like to introduce yourself, Carolyn?
Good morning, everyone. I am Carolyn Mims. I am the Marketing Office Manager for UC Berkeley Extension, also the Associate Diversity Officer, and I'm glad to be here today. Welcome, Yemi.
And yes, we are here today with Yemi Akisanya, and he is our guest speaker, and he comes from Groupon. So today we're going to learn more about his experiences and how he came to this role at Groupon. He is responsible for building Groupon's DEI global strategy focused on creating short and long-term plans to help build a more diverse and equitable and inclusive culture in services of Groupon's merchants, customers, and employees. Prior to Groupon, Mr. Akisanya served as the head of diversity and inclusion at OCC, which I want to learn a lot more about. He was responsible for building a diversity and inclusion office at the Clearinghouse, focused on attracting and retaining top talent, increasing diverse representation across levels, and reducing inequality in pay rates. Mr. Akisanya consulted on critical communication strategies, organizational change processes, and the future of work that aligns with the organization's objectives and values. He serves as the board of directors for IC STARS, a program that provides technology-based workforce development, leadership training, and access to career opportunities for low-income adults in the Chicago area. He also teaches and serves on the Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Advisory Group of Kellogg School of Management, as well as serves as the on the advisory board for the Nigerian Stock Exchange. He is a graduate of Northwestern University's Kellogg School of Management MBA program. He holds a Master of Science in Communication from Northwestern University. He graduated from Southern Illinois University with a bachelor's in Management Information Systems. So I'm excited to welcome you, Yemi. I myself had my formative years in Chicago and outside Chicago, so I'm excited to learn more about your story. Please join us and tell us how you came to this work.
Oh, God. Thank you, Jill. Oh, thank you, Caroline. First of all, I'm incredibly embarrassed at the length of that. That is, I need to work on that. That needs to be shortened. But yes, so again, Yemi Akisanya, Global Head of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion here at Groupon. First of all, I'd like to just say thank you to University of California, Berkeley Extension. Just, the work you're doing, this platform, the space, how you've kind of secured the safety around this space to have conversation around diversity, equity, inclusion, and more is just unbelievable. So kudos to the entire team. And I'm sure there's a lot of folks behind the production of this talk. So about me, how did I get here? So I'll try to keep it short, and Jill, feel free to ask follow-up questions. So my parents back in the 60s, Jill and Caroline, they were students who came to the US to further their education, just like many Nigerian immigrants at the time did. Fast forward a number of years, they had 4 children, and myself being the youngest. They had gotten their degrees from the universities here in Chicago, and decided to go back to Lagos, Nigeria with the entire family. I was barely 2 months old at the time, maybe just a little over. And we moved back to Lagos, Nigeria. I spent the next 14 years in Lagos, Nigeria, where, at the time, I think, when I was 6 years old, my parents got a divorce, unfortunately. The family split up. My eldest siblings, 2 of my eldest siblings, and my mom came back to the US. Myself and my most immediate brother stayed in Lagos, Nigeria. At 14, when I was just, getting ready to get started into high school, I came back to Chicago, and what was amazing, I couldn't wait. I was so excited. I was pumped about it because I only remembered the United States being around movies and things like that. So I was quite nervous because, growing up in Lagos, Nigeria, it's predominantly Africans and folks who were Black, and that was what I was used to. But I was confident that when I came to high school, 14 years old, and I was like, well, I'm going to be in a school with a lot of other people that don't look like me, and I had a really strong Nigerian accent at the time, and I was nervous, like, will they, welcome me? Would I be the odd one out? Long story short, I remember my very first day. It didn't take too long, and I was walking down the hallway, and folks were saying hello, and everyone's saying hello to each other, and I thought, I was hopeful that the folks that look like me, and these are the African Americans, were the folks who would obviously embrace me. I mean, we're the same. Unfortunately, those are the folks who tease me the most. I got all kind of names, African booty scratcher, Kunta Kinte, and again, 14-year-old kids, we're all cruel. So, but it was the others, the folks who were, Caucasian and white, the Mexican, those were the nice folks. They were like, oh, don't worry about the teasing, it gets better, and it did get better. So by the time I was a senior, it became great, all that good stuff. But anyway, fast forward, I went to college at Southern University, Carbondale, where I got an IT degree. I also played football during my time there, which was very helpful because it helped me pay my way through school. When I got done with that, I found a job working at an online education, CTU Online, College Technical University Online. I was an admissions advisor at the time, so I did that for a little while, paid some of the bills and loans that I had. And then I got back into IT, right? So I worked for JP Morgan & Chase. I did some quality assurance work, which is software testing. I was fortunate to work at CME. This is Chicago Mercantile Exchange. I did some work there as well. And then I got a chance to work at OCC, Jill. So, you talked about OCC. So OCC is Options Clearing Corporation. They're the world's largest derivatives clearing organization. So they clear derivatives. And literally pretty much like maybe 95%, if not more, of all the option derivatives, right? So, and also a good amount of the futures market. So I worked there as an IT professional, and then I kind of navigated my way. I think you mentioned this. About maybe 3 years into my career at OCC, I felt like I wanted to do something different, right? So a mentor of mine at the time advised me to go back to school and get a communications degree, master's. He said, Yemi, listen, you have a bachelor's in IT, and you have a great amount of experience working in a technical field. I think it'd be great. It'd be very complimentary if you had a communications background, and if you can combine your communication skills that you would attain at this university and your IT skills, you might position yourself well for maybe like a BA role or project manager role. And I thought that was great. And so I went to Northwestern to get a Master of Science in Communication, and literally it was a 10-month program. It took me 2 years. But literally like 6 months into the program, opportunity came up to become a business analyst at the company. And I jumped on it and I got the job. So I did it for a period of time and kind of worked my way around, and ended up becoming a product development manager, spending time bringing in new products, doing product strategy, corporate strategy. And at the time, I kind of grew really strong relationships with the chairman and the CEO at OCC, and Craig Donahue, great man. And he was a mentor of mine and guided me, and more of a mentor. He was a sponsor of mine. And so doing conversations with Craig, it's like, hey, listen, so, what are your goals? And I honestly, I didn't have any, Joe, but the first thing that came to mind was, I wanted to go back to school to go to Harvard, actually, to get a leadership development program called PLD. It's called Program for Leadership Development. It was like this online learning, gives you, Harvard alumnus status, teaches you about leadership and helps you grow in your career. And that was my goal. And I shared that with him. And he said, hey, sure, great, we can definitely support you in that, but why don't you think about getting your MBA? He got his MBA, and it did wonderful things for him in his life, not just professionally, but also personally, and said, hey, and I was like, hey, buddy, thank you for that, mentor, but I can afford to go to Kellogg or Booth, and those are the schools he suggested, even with tuition reimbursement, I couldn't afford that. And he said, hey, listen, don't worry about that just yet, just see if that's something that aligns with your future goals, and think about it and talk to your family. And I did that, and I came back and I said, listen, it'd be a dream if that could happen. And he said, okay, well, let's work on it. And that's how I got the chance to go to Kellogg and get my MBA. And while I was in the MBA program, and over the period of time, as I mentioned earlier, my passion for, access to opportunities is rooted deeply for me because of my personal experience and how I grew up and who I grew up with and where I grew up. So I've been, working with non-for-profits such as IC Stars, as you mentioned. So I've been doing that kind of work, and I've already shared with Craig my passion with the work and what I've done in the community and at home and back in Lagos and here. And so he knew there was a strong passion for that type of work. But He also knew that I had, corporate strategy experience, right, with the work I did on a day-to-day basis. And he had felt at the point in time that there could be a merge of those two. And he felt that, hey, listen, we're at an interesting point. And this was about maybe 4.5, 5 years ago, where he sat to think like, we should have a DEI program here at the OCC, and thought that I would be a good person to lead that up. And I thought he was crazy. I'm like, listen, I know nothing about DEI, nothing about it. I mean, obviously I have passion for the work, but I didn't know anything about it. I knew about strategy very well. I was comfortable with that. And obviously he thought there was a chance. So anyway, long story short, he provided the opportunity, and talking with mentors and others, I said, you know what, I'll take it. I thought it was a great opportunity for me to grow, and I did. And there was a lot of hard lessons along the way, but I think that with the type of support I got with going to school and taking classes and reading books and going to conferences and meeting people, and I think that really helped me a lot in my career. And then you fast forward a few years later, Groupon comes knocking. The opportunity at Groupon came around, and what was compelling for Groupon, or about Groupon at the time, was OCC again serves, it's a US company, US based company. Our products are created at the exchanges, and we clear them, right? So when you think about DEI at the company at OCC, it was about employees. It was about our communities, and we did that very well, and we really believed in that. But at Groupon, what was unique about it, and I'll pause here after I share this with you, was that Groupon was obviously about the employees, but not just in the US, right? Groupon is quite global, so we have offices around the world. So I thought, okay, God, like that's new to me. I hadn't worked closely, so I thought that was a great opportunity to stretch me. And then when you think about the stakeholders of Groupon from a DI perspective, it's not just focused on building a strategy for employees. Our merchants are there, right? Groupon is an experience marketplace. We connect merchants to consumers, right? So we enable small business owners and small business entrepreneurs. So to be able to have a strategy that's also supporting that merchant community, as well as our customers, right? Who obviously are the same folks as in many cases our merchants and our employees, right? To be able to support them as well through our strategies is quite powerful. And then again, it's a public, we have shareholders, so on and so forth. So anyway, I'll pause there, but that was my journey in about what it feels like 15 minutes, but in about 4 minutes.
Amazing. And what I find stands out for me with Groupon is that it's kind of a merging of a lot of the different things that you care about, because it's a tech company, but it's really dealing, as you're saying, with small businesses and merchants and people who may not be tech people, and yet they're trying to learn and embrace a new software that allows them to get to customers. And it's really about not only that small business development, but skills development. So I think it's really interesting that that's where your story arc has brought you so far.
Well said, Joe. And I'm looking forward to all the lessons that I'm sure I'll pick up along the way.
Fantastic. Well, let me turn it over to Carolyn.
Hey, Yemi.
Hey, Carolyn.
I love jollof and goat meat.
Listen,
I love it.
Yes, and you know about the jollof wars, right? So Nigerian has jollof, and Ghana, which is one of our Western neighbors in West Africa, also has jollof. So there's this thing about Nigerian jollof versus Ghanaian jollof. I'll tell you, Carolyn, please make sure you say you love Nigerian jollof better. Just
right? It's the different type. So do you find people have the same understanding of the words like diversity, equality, equity, fairness, belonging, and why do these definitions even matter?
It's a great question. So I would say this. So although some of us embody a mindset in which we're constantly immersed in thoughts about diversity, equity, inclusion, in thoughts about fairness, privilege, advocacy, others are only vaguely aware of these topics on a daily basis. Mm-hmm. Or some of us are not even aware of them at all. Right? So, and for me personally, as a person who has felt the sting of stigma, and also as a person who's also experienced the advantages of privilege,
Mhm.
right? I think it's important for us to ground ourselves in what it means when we talk about diversity, equity, inclusion. So they've also give some quick definitions. When I think about diversity, it's defined by who we are as individuals. It encompasses a range of similarities and differences that each one of us bring into the workplace. This includes, but not limited to, national origin, language, race, color, ethnicity, gender identity, sexual orientation, family structures, age, disability status, veteran status, socioeconomic status, morals, values, community. I can go on and on and on. I think the idea here is that what I just described is the physical embodiment of what it truly is about, right? When I think about diversity, it's about the diversity of thoughts and perspective that are driven and are uniquely different based on the things I just mentioned. Your race, your ethnicity, right? Depending on those identities, your experiences tend to be uniquely different, so to speak. When I think about inclusion, inclusion is about a working culture. It's an environment where colleagues, neighbors, community members are treated with equity and respect, have equitable access. And I'm going to talk about equity, not equal access, equitable access to opportunities and resources, and feel fully engaged and committed to helping the organization, the institution, the community achieve its goals and objective and purpose. That's what inclusion is about, a culture. And Renee Myers, a lady that I strongly respect in the industry, a D&I practitioner, she used an analogy that I love, and I'll share it with you all. She says that, diversity is about being invited to the dance party or to the dance. And inclusion is being invited to dance at the party, right? So when you think about that, diversity is just merely get an invitation to get a seat on the table.
Right.
But the inclusion part is that culture within to say, someone reaches out and say, hey, listen, would you dance with me? Would you bring your talent, your skills, your input into the table? So that's that. Equity, and Kellen, I'll pass this back to you once I define this. Equity for me is around promoting justice, impartiality, fairness within procedures, policies, processes, and distribution of resources. That's the work of equity, right? It's the governance, the environment that must integrate those voices and perspectives in a valued and meaningful way in the workplace. This is what harnesses the power of diversity. And so when I think about equity, the work is done in the systemic, in those procedures. For example, when you think about, it's usually something that you folks can probably relate with a lot. All right, so if I was to get into an MBA program at U of C or UC, there are some requirements I must meet, whether it's my, SAT, GMAT scores, GRE scores, those requirements are set. If you score within this level, you can get in here, right? Now, and again, this is no challenge to, you see, but have we thought about the impact that could have on individuals who come from communities where their socioeconomic background doesn't afford them the privilege to go into an institution, whether it's a high school, elementary school, that has the access to resources, good libraries, good teachers, to give them the type of foundation and acumen to prepare them for a standardized test like that.
Right.
Or maybe it's the fact that at the age of 16 and 14, They have to be the dads in the family or the moms in their own family. And they want to be ambitious. Right. So my point is, there are times when these qualifying, and I'll use institutions, not to pick on, education institutions, corporate institutions. We have, you have to have a bachelor's degree. You have to have, right? And as much as I understand the qualifying, of course we understand the reason why. But are there ways we can begin to think differently, where maybe there are certain groups or certain communities that we can create a sense of equity, whether it's scholarship, whether it's funding, whether it's additional programs where you could I'll give you a good example. And this is my story. When I took my ACT scores, again, I remember I came to the US age 14. 4 years later, I was obviously 18. I took the ACT test, and I'm not a very good standardized test taker. I'm just not. Okay. And I think my score at the time was around, and I'm not ashamed to say this, I think it was a 19. And I was really embarrassed. Most of my friends and colleagues and teammates were 25 and above. Some were 31, 32. And I was so ashamed. And I was like, what's wrong with me? So I applied for some schools. And Southern University, Carbondale, the school that I actually went to, was a school that said, hey, listen, you don't qualify, unfortunately, because your scores are below the scores we typically bring in. However, we do have a program that would allow you to come into the school during the summer. You would spend about 3 weeks taking some courses, and then you would be required to take certain courses in your first semester. If you pass these courses with a certain type of grade, we would allow you, so it's kind of like I got in on trial, so to speak.
Right.
That program is a program about equity. That's how I got in. And I went through the program and I ended up graduating. I got a degree. I'm working now. Thank God SIU had an equitable program that allowed a person like me to be able to go to college and graduate. I'll pause.
Yeah, I agree with you with the standardized testing. I was a single mother, and the resources weren't there for my kids to have the tutoring and, getting all the things they needed to get high scores. So I was one of those moms that went to like every library in the East Bay and was like getting the books and getting the Post-its and helping my kids get comfortable in testing, period, because it is a fear there. Don't know too much about why it derives, but it's there. So who is responsible for DEI, and what roles do people play in that?
Great question. So, Jennifer Brown, an author of this book, How to Be an Inclusive Leader, great friend of mine as well. In the book, it says this, and I really want to start answering the question by posing this. It said, if there were a playbook for implementing an effective DEI strategy, the first rule would be to obtain leadership buy-in. But the term buy-in can be misleading, because it suggests that leadership merely must be in agreement, when in fact, to obtain meaningful progress in DEI, leadership approval is not enough. That buy-in is not enough. Leaders will play the most important role in shaping the experience of any culture. Now, to answer the question, who's responsible for DEI? I believe that in an inclusive culture, the only way it happens is where every participant in the culture, every person in that culture or in that community agrees to take a closer look at themselves and begin to unravel our biases, and we all have them because we have brains, and do the hard work necessary to bring about a fair shot for all. We must all own the effort. We must all drive the strategy. We must all model the action. In other words, we must all strive to continuously be better social citizens. Okay. So to answer that question is quite complex because we do know the power that leadership has in influence and access to resources and so on and so forth, but it's not on their shoulder alone. Because there are only a number of leaders in a company or in a community or in an institution, right? We all have to understand what role each one of us has to play, right? So that responsibility is on each one of us, is on our daily interaction with our colleagues and our friends and our managers and our direct reports and so on and so forth. But I want to make sure that I say that by also emphasizing that company leaders and management play an important role in creating an inclusive workplace. But what matters the most is how colleagues interact with each other on a day-to-day basis. So the question is not who's responsible. The question is how is an individual, how are you may or may not be contributing to systemic barriers for others in the workplace, right? How are you? If you are, you might not be, and phenomenal, but let's take the work to think about that and think about the role that each of us has to play, right? So, I'll end with this, and I think it's John F. Kennedy, and I hope I don't butcher this. So I think it was President John F. Kennedy who said, ask not what your country can do for you, ask what you can do for your country. So when I think about that, and I want to be very sensitive yet respectful to that, when I think about the culture workplace, and I think about what DEI means in the workplace or in institutions, it's like, ask not what the leadership could do for you within the workplace or institution, fill in the blank. Like, ask, what can I do? Right? Not for the leaders, but for the folks I interact with on a day-to-day basis. They are the individuals who benefit from your inclusive leadership. So that's how, I hope I didn't dodge that, Caroline, but
Oh, I remember our discussion prior to today's series. You gave an analogy about football. If you can share that with us, that'd be great. That was awesome.
Yeah, happy to. Thanks for the nudge, right? So I remember I talked about I played football in college, right? So I played for the SIU, and I'm so thankful for playing, sports growing up. And so for those, I'll do my best to use the sports analogy, and I hope you can follow, right? So when you think about team sports, right, and football being one of them, American football that is, right? Each player on the team, right? So you have 11 players on offense going against 11 players on defense at a time. The goal is to score a touchdown, right? Get the pigskin football into the end zone of the team. Now, everyone on that team has a role to play. The receivers, their job is to, depending on what the play call is, to run and catch the ball. The quarterback, their job is to drop back and throw the football to the receiver or to the person that's open on the offense. And then there are like, those big guys that are up front, they're called linemen. Their job is to block the opposite team from getting to the quarterback, right? That's their job. They're just there to block, make sure they don't let anyone get their players. And everyone has roles like that. All those roles are unique, okay? So when I think about the workplace, I think that irrespective of our roles, whether we are the quarterback who is typically the captain of the team and calling the plays and calling the shots, let's call them the leader in this case. Whether you're the receiver, who's a person that's maybe working, as the product manager. Whether you are the offensive lineman, maybe you're the one working in the back office, in IT, cybersecurity, so we don't get attacked by all the crazy bugs that are out there. Mm-hmm. Irrespective of your role, right? Your position. Your role is unique. You have to do the work, your job specifically, for us to be able to get into the end zone. So in the workplace, irrespective of your role in the company, you have to do the work to ensure that you understand your role so we can move forward as a culture. And so that's typically the analogy I share when I talk about football in
Great.
comparison to culture.
Great. Jill, take it.
Awesome. Yeah, I like that idea. And one of the things, the defensive line creates space and an avenue to be successful. I think about that when I think about your sponsors, right? People who have opened a pathway for you to run through. And I think that's a great way to think about it. So when you think about the people at Groupon and their roles, what do you think your mandate is specifically at Groupon, and maybe how does that differ from other companies that you've been in? And what makes that approach unique, and how does the leadership work there?
Yeah, no, happy to share. Great question, Joe. So let me talk about Groupon for a quick second for those who might not be aware of Groupon. So Groupon is an experiences marketplace, right? Where you can find just about everything you want to do locally. Whether you're looking for something to do on a date night, take the kids to an activity like a Halloween activity or haunted house, whether it's going to dinner or getting a massage or whatever have you, Groupon helps consumers find fun and affordable experiences they're looking for at great values. Now, the ecosystem is this. Our merchant partners represent the diversity of the world in which we live in, right? These are the owners, the founders of the small businesses or the merchants we support. Every merchant has worked hard to build a business that they can be proud of, but it is important to us to understand the systemic barriers and biases that exist for our merchants, especially from those that come from marginalized communities. So as a company, we are committed to highlighting and championing the success of women and those owned by other underrepresented groups by connecting them to our diverse customer base. So, and this is driven by the idea that we believe in great communities. Specifically, we believe that successful local businesses are the backbone of vibrant neighborhoods. And we all know what the pandemic has done to most of our communities, especially just businesses. So if we do this right, Groupon can make things better for both building amazing communities at the same way supporting our merchants. Now, our customers, they represent a multitude of cultural and ethnic backgrounds, as well as the diversity of genders that goes across male and female, non-binary, and many others. They come from all walks of life, from every corner of the world, united by a common purpose to seek out and find the best experiences life has to offer. And they come to Groupon. So it is our duty to each and every single customer to speak with them with a sense of dignity and respect. And remember that reputations matter. Now, last but not least, our employees. So we have people from, oh my God, when you talk about diverse backgrounds and cultures, from within countries to within our global continents. And together, we make amazing things happen here at Groupon. Our work is only made stronger and more creative with the inclusion of mixed perspective, diversity of thought, diversity of perspectives. So we remain committed not only hiring talent from all walks of life, but giving our employees the room and the opportunity to have their voices heard as authentically as they can. So when you talk about Groupon and our DEI commitment, that's what I just explained. And Jill, you talked about leadership and how leadership can support this, right? So I think the first thing we needed to do was define the aspirational culture that we want at Groupon. And once we did that, and I can tell you, it's one where we celebrate diversity, we have mutual respect, and we're inclusive. And we want to be relentless in our efforts to foster diversity, equity, inclusion, and make these a part of the fabric of our Groupon's culture, right? So to this end, we have developed a culture work stream, for example. Okay, this team serves as a driving force to help us turn words into action. And I think that's a big part of what commitment means, right? When you think about commitment, is not just saying that I commit to this. It's not just the intent or believing that you want to make a difference, you want to do something. I think commitment comes full circle when the supportive action ties to that commitment, when the impact of your action makes a difference in people's lives, right? So this culture work stream does that at Groupon. We're taking those words to action, and this work stream is encompasses leaders across Groupon, influencers from a different array of geographies and teams and functions, whether it's our S team, our most leadership, senior leadership team, to our manager, mid-manager level, and so on and so forth. So we have, so I say, councils that are focused on our culture and ensuring that there's a sense of commitment between what we say we're going to do and what we actually do as a company, as a culture. So I'll pause there.
How do you build, that sort of trust and respect culture? And then you mentioned something that I thought was really interesting, how reputations matter, especially for these small businesses. They're struggling to survive. Yelp isn't necessarily helping. So how does that trust and respect translate into the product features or conflict resolution?
Yeah, it's a great question. If I knew the answer, I'd write a book and make a lot of money. Okay. But I can share with you, trust is a big part, huge, right? So here's a unique thing about Groupon, is that typically when you think about DEI teams, right, those teams report under human resources. That's majority how the governance structure works. At Groupon, it's under our global brand and marketing. And the understanding there is that marketing and brand, their job, just as an institution, is to build trust, develop a authentic brand recognition, and build ethos around the company. That's what they do. And when you think about DEI, we want to embed this in every fabric of our culture, of our community, both inwardly, like I mentioned, for our employees, and externally for our merchants and customers. We felt brand is probably the best fit for what you talked about with regards to trust. So how do you build trust? So trust is built, literally, the only way trust is built is by verbalizing your commitment and doing the work to stand by it, day in, day out. And when you do this over and over and over again, you begin to form a trusted brand, right? So I'm gonna pause here and give you a good example of how culture is formed through behavioral actions. And so this was a theory, and you can Google this. It's called the 5 wet monkey theory. The 5 wet monkey theory. And it's really just a theory. No monkeys were hurt in this theory. But the idea here, it talks about how culture is formed. And Jill, it also talks about how trust or lack thereof is formed. So let me take you back. Take me a second and go through this real quickly. So there were 5 monkeys in a science lab where the scientists would tie a string on a banana, drop it down the cage where the monkeys resided. The monkeys instinctively will go and grab the banana. What would happen is once they grab the banana, the scientists would come out with a fire hose of water and spray the monkeys until they let go of the banana. And they would repeat this exercise over and over again until the monkeys learned not to grab the banana. And what they then did once they did that was they took the fire hose and locked it away in the basement somewhere. And they came back and they put the string down with the banana hanging, and no monkey moved. Not one of them went for it. So they took out one of those monkeys, let's call them original monkeys, one of the 5 original monkeys that saw this. They took the monkey out and put the monkey in a different lab across the state somewhere. They grabbed another monkey from a different country and put it into the cage. And so it's 1 new monkey, 4 original monkeys. Now you repeat this exercise, bring down the string of banana. What happens? The new monkey dashes instinctively for the banana. But what was interesting was that the 4 other monkeys jumped on the new monkey to restrain it from grabbing the banana, knowing what's going to come afterwards. So they struggled with this monkey until that new monkey no longer went for that banana because it keeps getting restrained. Once that happened, they took out another of the 4 remaining original monkeys with a new monkey, and then ran this exercise over and over and over again until all monkeys did not reach for that banana. And at this point in time, what they realized was that culture had been formed. So now if you think about it, those 5 monkeys in the cage after the very last experiment, none of them had ever seen the fire hose. None of them saw it. However, all of them had learned, they had learned the behavior of not going to grab the banana. So when you think about the workplace, here's how I translate that. When you hear things like, oh man, that's not the way we do it here at fill in the blank, at Groupon. Oh, we don't do it, that's not the way we always do it this way at, UC Berkeley, or this is the way we normally do things. When you ask a question, you get a pushback that has nothing to do actually with the reason why. It's just more like, oh, that's just do it, trust me, do it this way. Right, that's that, restraint you see. So when you talk about trust, the only way to reverse this is to begin to create the incentives that supports the actions. So Jill, when you ask me about building trust is less about a beautifully written commitment letter. Building trust is about doing that hard work to stand by the commitment in which you put out there, day in, day out, and it's a slow journey. Slow journey.
I've never heard that story, and it's super helpful to think about that, and totally with you on that whole issue of how do you align rewards with the behaviors that you do want to see as opposed to, things that you don't want to have happen. Yeah. Carolyn.
Yeah, so you actually gave a little bit about how to change or how change happens in a large organization. So do you meet people where they are, and how do you encounter the resistance, and how do you respond to that?
It's a great question. And Carolyn, this is how I look at it. It is not about people being resistant or not resistant, right? It's just that everyone is acting and living according to their understanding and their intelligence. Not everyone can perceive life and understand life to the same extent. That's impossible. So we need to understand that people are the way they are because of the limitations that there are. We all have it. So we strive to see how we can help break those limitations and help them grow through cultural competence. That's what it is, right? You would not believe how many times I have had aha moments during unconscious bias trainings. I have taken them, listen, at least 1 billion times. Okay, maybe not. Maybe more like 25, 30 times, right? Just, through the research and, and every single time I have aha moments. Once I'm like, oh my God, I do that. Oh my God, all the time. And I'm immersed in this work, right? So imagine folks who are not as immersed in the work, right? Of course. So the idea is not about resistance. It's less about why you were resistant. It's more about how do I cultivate an understanding, right? To help inspire you to take the steps as an individual towards growing your cultural competence. Now, so that's resistance that might happen amongst interpersonal relationships. The biggest resistance we typically would see are systemic barriers, are institutionalized barriers. We talked about a couple, Caroline. We talked about those job requirements that could sometimes be restrictive to certain groups depending on their socioeconomic status. That's the real resistance. Or maybe it's laws. For example, in the US, we're able to capture and collect ethnicity, diversity information from, colleagues. In some countries overseas, we're not able to do that just yet, right? So we cannot, and again, what do they say? They say you manage what you can measure. So if we're not able to collect that, there is a blind spot for us there. Now, if you dig to the reasons why those laws exist, it's for good intent.
Right.
They're doing that because they want to limit discrimination based on ethnic background. So we get why they're doing it, but it could be, again, it could be sometimes restrictive in how we progress. So that'll be my response to how I typically would approach resistance. And for those, it's a journey.
Right.
Right. So we'll keep working, we'll keep learning, and keep finding ways to, again, empower our colleagues, empower people in our communities to do the work first individually, and then begin to cascade that work across the workforce.
Right. Well, now we're going to have some questions from our guests, our attendees. So Jill, you want to start off with some of the questions we have?
Sure. Let's start out with Dia Kana asks, Yemi, thank you for opening with your personal story. I was born in Singapore, raised in Canada, and now live in the United States, and see a big gap between what Americans learn from other Americans and what they need to learn from non-Americans. What do you think is the best way for a company DEI What do you think is the best way for company DEI leads to finally step into the global approach to continuously learning from other countries?
Oh my God, what a beautiful question. Who is this? Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. Fantastic question. And a very difficult one. So I can tell you what we're trying to do at Groupon. And again, it's a work in progress. And please, again, when I share these practices, by no means are these like, best practices, right? But these are things that we're seeing progress with, and when we're working through it. So to answer your question, I think one of the ways that we are seeing this is that we're really using the power of our ERGs, right? These are employee resource groups. And we feel that it's important for us to have employee resource groups that, by the nature of how we structure the program, it's empowering the local voice. And let me say that. So employee resource groups are voluntary-led groups that create a safe space for identity groups to come together to share ideas, thoughts, and support programming or goals or what have you. Opportunity for networking, opportunity for leadership development, and so many opportunity for a safe space for psychological safety and conversations. I can go on and on about the benefits of ERGs. But I think what has happened so far is that when we think about what has happened over the past year with the civil unrest, we've seen a demand for companies to step up to support employees a little more deeper than companies have in the past before. So for companies that are global, what you're seeing is that when the Black Lives Matter movement became completely polarized, what you're seeing is that companies immediately ran, whether you're global or not, and said, hey, listen, we want to have Black, ERGs are for Black employees. We want to have Black Lives Matter advisory groups and councils and what have you. And I get why. But for the global companies, and to the question, I think it's very important for us to realize, to say, as much as it's incredibly important for us here in the US, due to historical nature of the experience of Black people in America, does it look the exact same way in Singapore? Does it look the exact same way in Lagos, Nigeria? No, not quite. So I think it's important for us to ensure that, yes, we want to have that conversation across our global footprint, but ensure that the topic that's a priority for each single country, so to speak, region, so to speak, is what's the resources are supporting. So what I suggest is that have your ERGs organically be created locally. So Blacks are Groupon North America. Maybe in Singapore, it's multicultural at Groupon Singapore. But then how do you begin to connect the ERGs so you can have folks who are from Singapore learn more about what's going on in the US with regards to this movement, and vice versa. So my question would be to really find ways to create, whether it's ERGs, business resource groups, what affinity groups, to create bodies of vehicles within your corporation that are employee driven, but are, again, honest to the local priorities first and foremost, create that safe space, and then begin to connect those ERGs to ensure that there is a cross-functional flow of cultural competence. And I think that'd be a great way to hopefully begin to share that across a global footprint.
Great. So we have a question from Linda Pond. I've seen some discussions around DEI become defensive. Any advice or experience on how to take ego out of the conversation?
Yeah, no, it's a great question. And I think a lot of times, you know, and forgive me, I think a lot of times it's that work can be done in a framing of how we present the conversation. And I'll give you an example. You know, I spend a lot of times working a lot with colleagues and executives. And just the reality of it is many of whom are white, heterosexual males. And again, for me, I think it's incredibly important to really be able to build authentic relationships and friendships with these individuals so you can kind of get the truth, what's really going on in people's minds and hearts. And so some of my colleagues, former colleagues specifically, have shared with me as a white, you know, heterosexual male, as an executive, that, Yemi, listen, can I be honest with you? Cancel culture scares me. And it scares me because, you know, I have a family. I'm not at retirement yet. And I'm afraid that if I have conversations I don't know much about, I might say the wrong thing and then be labeled incorrectly. And I lose my livelihood, my reputation, and all that I've worked hard for over the 35, 45 years of my career. So I would rather not be part of it, but I will support it as much as I can from the back. But I'm afraid to make mistakes. It's a real thing. And some others have said, I feel guilty. Whenever I hear about racism as a white man or a white woman, I feel like I did it, or I'm being blamed for all the X, Y, and Z. And so my defensive walls are up, and I want to hide, and I don't want to have those conversations, right? So it's real. These are real things. So what we can do is we could say, you know what though? I don't care. This is real stuff going on, right? You're getting a little taste of how it feels to be, you know, marginalized all my life, and you're gonna have to listen to this because I'm not lying to you. This is real stuff, and I can be that way. I can come and say, hey, listen, I'm real. I keep it real, you know. Well, then you can say, listen, the goal here is not to just tell you what the truth is or the facts are or my experience are. The goal is really to hopefully inspire you to change, or hopefully inspire you to want to go on that journey of self so you can self-identify opportunities where you could maybe change or improve. The goal is to hopefully inspire you to helping us all have the type of culture that is welcoming and inclusive, and we all feel a sense of belonging. If that is truly the goal, I think we need to do a better job in ensuring that we are using a lot of our EQ to measure and make sure that these walls are low enough so your message can get across. Like, we could do some work on our end as well. So for me, I think it's important for us to think about the framing, to think about the audience, and to think about where we're having these conversations. Some conversations I'm able to have in public with 40 plus people. And some conversations I'd rather have one-on-one. And I think I need to be aware of it as the individual delivering that information, to ensure, again, it's not to, you know, bend to other people. It's to focus on the goal at hand. What is it that I'm trying to accomplish? If it is change, then I will do whatever it takes to ensure my message gets across, so hopefully inspires change. And so that's always been my approach. And it's a work in progress.
Yeah, I really appreciate your candor and also sharing the perspective of some of the other people that you've worked with and having empathy for where their challenges reside, but not letting that be an excuse either. So I really appreciate that full circle. And you kind of touched on it a little bit, but how have the current events, there have been a lot of social justice challenges in the past couple of years, coupled with COVID. How have current events changed DEI?
Oh, that's a big one because it has tremendously, right? And so with respects to the evolution, when you consider the recent national and global conversation around anti-Black, anti-Asian, homophobic, anti-Semitic, and all forms of racism and injustice, when viewed through the lens of our community and all the many achievements our community has gotten over the centuries, Jill, it shows us that access to our resources and opportunities for advancement are not equal. Today, 2021, they still are not equal, not on a global, national, or corporate level. We have a lot of work to do, but this work starts with listening to our stakeholders. And who are our stakeholders? These are our employees and colleagues. These are our clients and partners. These are our customers. These are the communities in which we live, in which we work. We need to listen, right? And listen intensely, right? Because that's where the work begins. It's there. It's not simply having empathy, Jill. It's a great thing to have empathy, right? When you put yourself in someone else's shoes and try to experience life through their lens. That's a kind gesture. Thank you. But that gesture can never be full until you walk through those shoes, right? So Caroline talked about how she was a mom, raising kids, working. I can be empathetic and be like, Caroline, I get it. I'm a dad. I have a son, I'm working. But I can never get quite close to her experience. So I need to listen to her experience intensely. And with that information, and listen more and create mediums where Caroline can feel safe to share the authentic truth about how she's really feeling, about what's really going on, and not present this, hey, yes, send us whatever, tell us anything. But then we really don't want to listen, right? So how do we create these mediums, whether it's through ERGs, whether it's through anonymous portals, to help people be able to authentically share what they're truly feeling? And then how do we take that information and turn it into action of support? It's not easy. I mean, it's really not easy. So when you think about DEI, that's one of the biggest challenges for organizations is do we really want to know these things? Do we really want to know these things? And if we really do, are we prepared to provide the resources to truly enable a culture of inclusivity? There are lots of barriers, and a lot of those barriers are not individuals. There are systems, they're the norm, they're the culture, right? They are the fire hose in the Five Red Monkeys story, right? So again, it's not a one size fit all. It'll look different for each break, but what you've seen with the civil unrest over the past 18 months or so has really heightened the conversation. So I'm really happy to see that, right? So there is a silver lining. We're seeing a lot more companies now speak about commitments to improvement, and I think that's phenomenal. And we're seeing the results of that. But I think there's a long way for us to go.
So do you believe that the pathway is now opened and that will lead us to success? And how do you define that?
I am, oh God, that's a tough one. I am optimistic that the pathway is now open. I am optimistic about that. Will it lead us to success? You know, I guess it depends, right? Like success is, what is success? Like, how is that defined? You know, I've always struggled with that. How do we define success in the workplace, especially when it comes to DEI? Is success achieving diversity targets? Or is success Having pulse surveys that are increasing. Is a success seeing more women in leadership? I hold a point of view. Here's my point of view, and I'll share it with you all. I hold the point of view that we shouldn't focus on success. We can't define it. I mean, it's hard to define success. So I don't think we should focus on that, but rather we should focus on progress. And we can do that using data, right? Because I believe success is going beyond, like I just explained, going beyond implementing, policies, implementing practices. It goes beyond the ability to weave D&I into the culture. Success is in the experience of our colleagues. We just talked about the fact that each colleague comes from different backgrounds, so it will look different for each person, right? So if the success is an experience, then don't get too focused on that.
Right.
Get focused on progress as an organization.
Yeah, that's one of our attendees said, progress over success.
All day.
Excellence over perfection.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah,
That's it.
I
I
agree.
agree.
That's
Yeah.
fantastic. And, as we think about kind of success is, as you were saying, equitable access to opportunity, right? So when we think about access to jobs, access to upskilling, what do you see the role of companies? Are there other people who have a role in this upskilling? I asked this question because I'm actually going to teach a challenge lab next semester where we're asking students to address this very question. So I'm curious what you have to say.
Yeah, so tell me, what's the question? Could you pose that to me directly?
So the question is, how do we improve access to opportunity and especially access to, future of work type jobs?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. And I love that question because I think it starts with, why are we doing that? Jill, why are we doing that? That's the question I would like to know.
So for me, the Uber goal is equity, in reducing the wealth gap, increasing participation, and job satisfaction for everyone.
Absolutely, and that's a beautiful answer. And as I think deeply about it, the reason why some people care about that is for the moral case. That is the right thing to do, Jill. It's right that there's equal pay. It's right that everyone has. There's a moral case that supports that. But we're talking about corporations here, right? We live in a capitalist country, a capitalist world, for-profit world. And the lights stay on when we make money, right? And that's what drives a lot of strategy when you talk to a lot of boards or founders or owners. So how do we begin to tie what you just explained towards a business case, right? And if we can begin to find a way to say, yes, moral case is incredibly important, absolutely. And then we can begin to find ways to say, hey, is there a business case for this? And I think as we get closer to bringing these two things together, I think you would begin to see real resources put behind the work. But if it's just for the better, when things get tough and share price starts to drop, this will probably be one of the first things to drop. Okay, so for me, I think it's important for us to get grounded in what can be sustainable long-term. How is this part of our growth strategy, right? So that's where we need to start. And once we can get grounded and get committed in that, then I say, oh, there are lots of ways we can do what you've just posed as a question to me. Lots of ways. There are programmings. This can be accomplished through more targeted hiring of underrepresented talent. Why is that important? Because the future of work says so. If we look at our communities for a second and take a step back and say, where are we going to be? What's the trajectory of the diversity of the community in which we live in? We've seen every community grow. We've seen African Americans in America grow over the last 20 years. We've seen, and the trajectory is growing pretty rapidly. We've seen Hispanics and Latinx folks grow. We've seen folks within the LGBTQ community. That's growing widely in our communities. We're seeing them in our kids' schools. We're seeing everyone everywhere. We are them, right? So our communities is progressively diverse, is more globalized nature. right? If that's happening, the future of work is going to look a lot different, where top talent is not going to be your 1965, 1967 heterosexual white male. I mean, the pool that was all that was the community, that was the pool, that's all you had. So it made sense that the workforce reflected the community in which it served and it worked. But Caroline, we're not there anymore. We're here. And the trajectory is there. It's becoming increasingly diverse. So if we don't have leaders who know how to lead diverse individuals, irrespective of race, irrespective of gender, irrespective of who you are, the skin color, what, if we don't have leaders that can do that, those companies are not going to have the best talent. And we know having the best talent means you're going to be one of the top businesses in the world. So I tell folks that the programming part is the easy part. Is having leaders understand the power of having the best talent, not just diverse talent, the best talent, right? And so that's my approach and that's my response to that. And again, there are ways you can create programming to help, do all these things, but I think we have to get grounded in why we're doing them and making sure that that's something that's part of the growth strategy.
And I think the whole shift to remote work is going to be an aid of that mission as well.
Yes, absolutely. And that's going to be a challenge, right? Because the culture we once understood in the workplace was a culture that required us to be in person. That was the culture. And now what we're seeing is a hybrid, in some cases fully remote. So it's going to look completely different. So firms, companies have to learn quickly on how we need to adjust. And we need to try to be as proactive as possible and try to anticipate. But we're going to need to be reactive as possible and learn in this new space. And so I'm excited about it, to be honest with you. And I think, again, it's going to help make sure that our workplaces are a lot more diverse, right? The excuse of not finding diverse talent no longer exists because they don't have to live in your community anymore.
Exactly.
Yeah.
The screen will look different.
Absolutely.
Absolutely. So we have a question by Deborah Durbin. Building out DEI, I have encountered a Black anger towards the history here, wanting reparations and feeling the Japanese were paid off for internment. Can I bring that emotional connection to a point that we can work together for all groups?
Why not? I think you can. I think it's about, and by the way, thank you for the question. Beautiful question. I think you can. Answer is yes. But I think the question is how? Mm-hmm. How do you do that? How do you do that in a way where, people don't feel defensive, like someone said earlier? The walls are up. They don't feel attacked. They don't feel it's political. They don't feel it's this. They don't feel it's that. They don't know how to. They don't want to be a part of the conversation because they don't know enough about the conversation. How do we begin to educate people? So this is where strategy is important. Because I would like to just say, hey, listen, I want to have a meeting with everyone and talk about this. But sometimes we need to be strategic about how we want to do that. Do I start by, just make an example, start a book club and let the book be titled White Fragility, for example. Let the book be called How to Be an Anti-Racist by Ibram Kendi. And maybe that book takes you through the historical context of racism. And then people start to learn more about, like, oh my God, I didn't know that. And then maybe then they'll be better tooled to have this really important conversation. But I think it's important for us to make sure that folks have the understanding. It's almost like, and give an example. It's like being a PhD, a top PhD math student. And you have figured out all the tough formulas and all the tough problems. And then you go to a high school, or maybe even elementary school, and you see a fifth grader, and you expect them to understand how to solve the problem that took you years of lived experience. Took you years of lived experience, whether it was a marginalized community experience or what have you. It took you years of lived experience to get to the point that you have the competency. But then you expect this sixth grader, fifth grader, to all of a sudden be able to give you some solutions how you can make a change happen, I think it's a tall order. So I think there are ways we can begin to educate this individual to get up to speed, because they can't have the lived experience because they're not you or not within that group. But there are ways we can educate you to get you to the point where you can start to say, oh my God, okay, we do need this change. So, and I know we're at time, but I want to pause there. But typically, I think the question is, yes, absolutely, you can have this. But I think you need to think through strategically, where do you start? How do you go about doing it? I think that would depend on many different cases.
Thank you, Yemi. And yes, as you are correctly anticipating, we are reaching the end. So I wanted to give you just 1 minute to, give your last final thoughts or advice for people who may want to go into this field, or people who are currently in the field or contributing as in any role that they might have.
Yeah, no, thank you, Jill, Carolyn, thank you. Thank you all for this opportunity. And I tell you, I struggle sometimes with these conversations only because, typically the speaker is positioned as an expert or as a know-it-all, and I'm neither of those. I'm just like you. I'm learning every day. I'm growing every day, but I think what I've learned is that there's power in relationships. That's right. So what I would share to people is get to know people. Try to be as authentic as you can, but it takes work to get there, right? Ask questions about people's homes and their families and where they're from. Seek to understand first. I think these are things we typically do with friends, but I think we can do it in the workplace as well, or we can do it in the schools as well. So for me, it's like, just try to build this authentic relationship with it. The sense of trust is there. And then we're able to have this deeper conversations a lot easier. And folks' wall is not as high because I trust that you mean well when you ask me a certain question. I trust that you made a mistake when you make a mistake, because we've built this relationship. It doesn't feel like microaggression because you're my friend. But if you're a stranger, it feels like microaggression because I don't know where you're coming from. I don't know your intent. It feels not so good. So what I'll leave with you all is just, where do you start? Start with, looking at the person who might have a different experience than you growing up. And it doesn't have to be about race. They can be the same race as you. Maybe they're from a different country. Maybe they're from a different community. Start somewhere. Maybe they're a different gender. I mean, I think it goes beyond the definition of what difference looks like. I think we should always just seek to continue to grow our cultural competence and tie action to that at the end of that. And I think we'll be fine. But anyway, thank you so much for this.
Thank you.
I think it was a wonderful, safe space, and I hope it was valuable. I really do.
It's very valuable. Greatly, greatly appreciated. This was great stuff. And just to piggyback on what you said about building community within the workforce or your work environment, the group I work with, we have become friends, and I'm so grateful because those microaggressions, emotions aren't there where I'm thinking, what do they want from me? Or why do they, talk to me in that way? But it's definitely important to build relationships at your place because you're there 8 hours, 10 hours a day and interacting with these people. They have to mean something to you, right? So thank you so much.
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Carolyn, for being my co-moderator. I really appreciated your participation and contributions and personal stories. Thank you, Yemi, for the candor and the insights that you brought. Hopefully this is the beginning of a relationship. And thank you to all of our attendees, because they've made an investment in this area and are doing the work and are participating and engaging in these important conversations. I also want to thank the Berkeley Extension team for making these conversations possible. And we will be sharing this on YouTube. And our next conversation will be with Jarvis Sam, who is the Vice President of Global Diversity and Inclusion at Nike. Not a traditional perceived tech company, but will be an exciting conversation on November 16th. Thank you all for joining us. We had a wonderful time. Thank you, Yemi.